Welcome to the Alcohol Minimalist podcast. I'm your host, Molly Watts. If you want to change your drinking habits and create a peaceful relationship with alcohol, you're in the right place. This podcast explores the strategies I use to overcome a lifetime of family alcohol abuse, more than 30 years of anxiety and worry about my own drinking, and what felt like an unbreakable daily drinking habit. Becoming an alcohol minimalist means removing excess alcohol from your life so it doesn't remove you from life. It means being able to take alcohol or leave it without feeling deprived. It means to live peacefully, being able to enjoy a glass of wine without feeling guilty and without needing to finish the bottle. With science on our side, we'll shatter your past patterns and eliminate your excuses. Changing your relationship with alcohol is possible. I'm here to help you do it. Let's start now. Well, hello and welcome or welcome back to the Alcohol Minimalist podcast with me, your host, Molly Watts, coming to you from, it's a little bit of a cloudy-ish. Is that a word? I'm going with it. Cloudy-ish, Oregon today. It's been cloudy. It's been a little bit breaks of sun. Definitely rain got dumped on Saturday. Big, and thunder, actually. So we're in that kind of intermittent rain, sun that it does here in the late spring, early summer around Oregon. On to the 4th of July, which can be a crapshoot, for lack of a better word, here in Oregon. Sometimes really nice, sometimes not so nice at all. We'll see what this week holds for us. Today on the podcast, we are wrapping up the series When Drinking Less Feels Hard. And before we get there, I do want to remind you that I am doing a Mostly Dry July program starting on Wednesday, July 1st. It's called Mostly Dry July The Daily. And this I brought back from January. It's a 31-day look into what it looks like to be an alcohol minimalist. I do a private daily podcast. I do daily videos. I do group coaching calls, group weekly emails, kind of a recap of things. And it's just a really great program. People love it. And I love spending time with people, especially people who maybe don't know what coaching looks like. And so this is a great opportunity to kind of learn what that is. Super affordable. You can check it out over at www.mollywatts.com/mostly-dry-July. Mostly Dry July. It's mostly dry. You do not have to be completely alcohol-free for 31 days. The goal is to prioritize alcohol-free days, and we talk about that along the way. Progress over perfection, right? And so I would love to have you join me. Go check it out. All right, on to this week's show. Like I said, this whole series, the When Drinking Less Feels Hard, started because I asked questions in the Alcohol Minimalist Facebook group about what real life challenges come up for people as they are trying to drink less. And I used all the input that I got and am now looking at those real life challenges through the lens of alcohol core beliefs. And over the last few weeks, we've talked about alcohol helps me relieve stress and the difference between a short-term state change and real relief. We've talked about alcohol makes things more fun and alcohol creates connection, especially in those social situations where alcohol feels like part of the experience. And last week, we talked about alcohol is my reward and what happens when alcohol becomes the treat or the prize for getting through the day, getting through the week, the responsibility, or anything that you have to expend effort on. Today, we're going to look at the final alcohol core belief in this series, and that is alcohol keeps me going. And this one can be a little sneakier than the others. Most people can recognize the thought alcohol helps me relax. They actually probably recognize I deserve a drink. But alcohol keeps me going often shows up as boredom, as restlessness, as wanting one more, not wanting the night to end, or feeling like alcohol is the thing you look forward to when everything else feels routine. It might sound like, I'm bored, so I'll have a drink. It might sound like I'm home alone, so why not? It might sound like I'll just have one more while I watch the next episode. Or it actually might sound like if I don't drink tonight, then what am I even going to do? And that last question matters because the belief is not always about energy in the literal sense. More often, alcohol keeps me going means alcohol keeps the evening interesting. It keeps the mood going. It helps you avoid the transition into quiet, into boredom, into rest, or the end of the day. And that's why this is such a good final episode for this series, right? Sometimes alcohol keeps you going because you're trying to avoid stress or discomfort. Sometimes it keeps you going because you don't want the fun or the connection to end. And sometimes it keeps you going because the reward ritual has turned into a continuation ritual. And sometimes it just keeps you going because stopping feels uncomfortable or ordinary or a little too quiet. So the deeper issue is not I'm bad at stopping. The deeper issue is often my brain believes alcohol helps me keep the night going, helps me escape boredom, helps me stay engaged to avoid the transition into stopping. And that's a much more useful way to look at it, because if you make it about being bad at stopping, like once I start, I just can't stop, you'll probably go straight to shame. You will think, what's wrong with me? Why don't I have more discipline? Why can't I just be done? But if you understand that your brain has learned to associate alcohol with momentum, with stimulation, with continuation, now you have something to work with. And as always, that's what we want. Not shame, we want information. On the Alcohol Core Beliefs mind map, which I will link again in the show notes, alcohol keeps me going includes thoughts like drinking stops my boredom. Another drink helps me stay awake. Drinking is what I look forward to when I'm done with my work. And alcohol energizes me. When I look at those thoughts, what stands out is that they are not really about alcohol as a beverage. They are about what alcohol seems to provide in the moment. Stimulation, interest, anticipation, momentum, something to look forward to, or a way to avoid that flatness that can show up when the day is winding down. And this is especially true for people who drink when they're home alone and bored. Boredom sounds simple, but boredom can be surprisingly uncomfortable. It is not just the absence of something to do. Sometimes boredom is the absence of meaning, the absence of engagement, the absence of connection. Sometimes boredom shows up when your brain has been overstimulated all day, and then suddenly there is quiet. I really want you to hear that one again because it's super important, especially for my people who are challenged by attention deficit hyperactivity disorder or any attention deficit disorders on that spectrum. Sometimes boredom shows up when your brain has been overstimulated all day and then suddenly there is quiet. Boredom is what you feel when you finally stop being productive and don't quite know how to just be. And if alcohol has been the thing that helps you change that boredom into something else, then of course your brain is going to offer it up, right? Especially if you've created a habit around it. Alcohol can make an ordinary evening feel like it has more texture. It can turn watching television into an event, make scrolling feel more intentional, and make sitting out on the patio feel like this is just what I'm doing tonight. But here's the question I want you to consider. Is alcohol actually creating interest, or is it lowering your expectation that the evening needs to be interesting? Sometimes alcohol makes boredom feel less boring, not because it adds true engagement, but because it gives the brain a predictable reward cue. Now, the night feels like it has a point, not necessarily because the night became more meaningful, but because the brain recognizes the pattern. And this is the part where we drink. This is why this belief can become such a tight loop. You feel bored, you drink. Boredom feels less sharp for a while, and the brain learns that drinking solves boredom. But if alcohol becomes the practiced answer, the brain does not have to develop other sources of interest. It does not have to learn how to rest without numbing, how to create novelty, how to engage in hobbies, how to tolerate quiet, or simply how to let the day end. And then, without alcohol, the evening feels empty. Not because it actually is empty, but because alcohol has been filling the space for so long that your brain has not practiced anything else. And this is where we have to be careful not to confuse familiar with necessary. A drink may be familiar when you are bored, but that does not mean it is necessary. A drink may be familiar when you're home alone, but that does not mean that being alone requires alcohol. Let's bring in some science. Alcohol, as we know, interacts with the brain's reward system, all those dopamine pathways. But dopamine often gets confused as being a pleasure drug or a pleasure neurotransmitters, but it's also about learning, motivation, and prediction. Your brain learns what to pursue based on what has been rewarding before. And it also learns that cues predict that reward. So when boredom, loneliness, or back to the other things, Friday night, vacation, television, being home alone, has been repeatedly paired with alcohol, those situations can begin to trigger desire before you have even made a conscious decision. The brain predicts this is when we drink, and that prediction can feel like desire. That's why urges can feel like they come out of nowhere. They don't really come out of nowhere. They come out of past learning. And learning is changeable. We can change our brains. We talked about the idea of alcohol myopia, the idea that alcohol narrows attention. When you've been drinking, the most immediate and noticeable cues tend to get more attention, while the quieter, less immediate cues kind of fade into the background. And in real life, this helps explain why one more can feel so convincing. Once you've had a drink or two, the loud cues are easy to notice. The show is still on, the conversation's still going, the glass is empty, the bottle's open, the evening has momentum. And meanwhile, the quieter cues are harder to hear. The one where you had the plan that I would stop at 2, where you thought about the fact that you wanted to sleep well, that you have plans tomorrow, that you don't want to wake up anxious, and that another drink actually probably won't add value. Alcohol makes those loud cues louder and the quiet cues quieter. And that's why we've talked about why it can be difficult to snap into awareness after you've already been drinking. Awareness is much easier to access before the first drink than after the third. That is absolutely true. It also isn't impossible. It does not mean you're doomed. It means awareness needs to be planned before alcohol starts narrowing attention. And that's why the belief alcohol keeps me going needs a plan, not just a promise. A promise sounds like I won't have more than 2. A plan sounds like before I pour the next drink, I'm going to check in and ask whether this adds value or just adds alcohol. A plan might include putting a non-alcoholic drink between alcoholic drinks, deciding what time the kitchen closes, and not drinking or making a clear transition into bed before you are too tired to care. Hey, it's Molly, and I'm here to talk to you about Sunnyside Med. That's right, Sunnyside has a new program that they've been offering that includes medication that can quiet alcohol cravings. It's called naltrexone, and it works by making alcohol less rewarding in your brain. And Sunnyside now offers access to naltrexone 100% online and combined with personalized care. Thousands of people have already joined Sunnyside Med and are cutting their drinking nearly in half. Sunnyside Med doesn't just give you a pill. It is a whole support system to help you reach your goals. I really want you to check it out, so visit sunnyside.co/minimalist to learn more and see if you qualify today. Having a plan ahead of time, a doable plan. Also, I talk with my folks all the time about setting yourself up for success. That's what we mean when we say having a plan, not just a promise. I'm not saying that you need to make your life rigid or joyless. I am saying that if you know that your brain believes alcohol keeps things going, then you want to decide what going even means. Going where? Towards more fun or towards a worse morning? Towards connection or towards checking out? Towards real pleasure or towards avoiding the moment when the night is over? This question matters because sometimes the desire for one more is not really desire for more pleasure. It is resistance to ending. Endings can be uncomfortable. The end of a workday can mean facing responsibilities at home. The end of the night can mean quiet. The end of vacation mode can mean ordinary life is waiting. So alcohol becomes a way to postpone those transitions, right? One more drink before I clean up. One more drink before I go to bed. One more drink before tomorrow starts. That's why one of the most powerful questions for this belief is, what am I trying not to transition into? Because if alcohol keeps you going, it may also be helping you keep from something else. It may be keeping you from rest, from boredom, from quiet, from disappointment, from the simple admission that you are tired. It may be keeping you from noticing that the day did not include enough real pleasure, or that you need connection, or that you are ready to stop, but you don't quite know how. I love the phrase permission to stop for this episode. Some of us are very good at doing, producing, managing, planning, working, responding. But stopping can feel unfamiliar. Alcohol can become the thing that gives us permission to stop while still giving the brain something to do. And it's a strange contradiction. Alcohol helps us feel off duty, but it also gives us a project. Pour the drink, sip the drink, think about the next drink. So maybe it doesn't really help us teach us how to stop, right? Maybe it teaches us to keep engaging with alcohol instead of learning how to rest. Let's take this into the 4S new belief system, the see, soothe, separate, shift process, because this is how we work with alcohol core beliefs in real life. First, see. Seeing means noticing when the belief is active. With alcohol keeps me going, it's going to sound like I'm bored. I want one more. I don't want the night to end. I don't know what else I would do. It may also show up as restlessness, as wandering into the kitchen, kind of scrolling while your glass keeps getting refilled. And seeing sounds like this. I'm having the thought that alcohol will keep this going. Or I'm having the thought that drinking will make this boring moment feel better. That sentence creates space between the urge and the action. And then we're going to soothe. This is where you normalize what your brain is doing without turning it into a command. You might say, of course my brain is offering one more. This is a familiar pattern. Of course boredom feels uncomfortable. I'm used to changing it quickly. Or, of course I don't want the night to end. I wanted more pleasure today. That last one is important because sometimes the urge for another drink is really information that the day didn't feel satisfying enough. If the day was all obligation and very little pleasure, your brain may be trying to squeeze pleasure out of that last hour before bed. And then we separate. This is where you separate the facts from the story. The fact may be that you feel bored, but the story is that alcohol is the only way to make the evening interesting. The fact may be that you're having fun, but the story is that another drink will create more fun. The fact may be that you feel tired, but the story is that alcohol is helping keeping you energized. And these facts may be real, but the story is always optional. And that's where we need to shift. We shift it. That's the last S. A shift does not need to be dramatic. It just needs to be believable. You might shift to alcohol may keep the drinking going, but it might not make the night better. Or I can be bored without making boredom an emergency. Or I may need rest more than I need another drink. Simply, I can let the night end and still have had enough. And here's one I really like because it goes back to that permission to stop. I am allowed to stop before I am forced to stop. I am allowed to stop before I am forced to stop. Because so often the night ends only when alcohol or exhaustion or regret decides it's over. Peaceful control means you get to decide. And for this belief specifically, I want you to practice building what I'll call a stopping ritual. We talked last week about end of the day rituals, and this is related, but a little more specific. A stopping ritual is how you teach your brain that the evening can come to a close safely, intentionally, and without needing alcohol to drag it out. That might mean pouring a final non-alcoholic drink in a glass, turning off the kitchen lights, brushing your teeth earlier, setting your phone to charge outside the bedroom, or choosing a specific time when you transition from stimulation to rest. It might mean writing down one thing you enjoyed about the day so your brain does not feel like it has to keep hunting for pleasure. It might mean deciding before the night starts what enough will look like, because enough is very hard to recognize if your only cue is, I don't want to be bored. And if boredom is the big driver for you, then your practice may be less about stopping and more about building interest. What would you actually like to do with your evenings if alcohol were not filling the space? What have you stopped doing? What do you miss? What would feel absorbing, calming, creative, useful, playful, or connecting? This matters because drinking less cannot be the only plan. If alcohol has been your entertainment, your transition, your reward, your hobby, then simply removing it is going to leave a blank space. And that blank space is not a sign that life without alcohol is boring. It is a sign that alcohol has been occupying space that now needs to be rebuilt on purpose. And at first, those alternatives may feel less exciting. That's okay. Your brain has a history with alcohol. It has a meaning and repetition attached to alcohol. And a new ritual, a new hobby, or a new evening routine may not feel equally rewarding on day one. That does not mean it won't work. It means repetition. Just like you've repeated everything with alcohol, you need repetition with the new interest, and that will become more rewarding. You are not just making one decision. You are retraining your brain. And retraining your brain is such an important part of becoming an alcohol minimalist, because enough can be enough. One drink can be enough. A nice dinner can be enough. One show can be enough. An hour of quiet can be enough. Friday night can be enough. And that's what having a peaceful relationship with alcohol is all about. Not because you never want more, but because wanting more no longer has to run the show. So here's your practice for this week. Choose one moment where alcohol tends to keep you going. Maybe it's home alone and bored. Maybe it's after the first drink when your brain starts looking for the next one. Maybe it's when you don't want to go to bed. In that moment, pause and ask, what do I think alcohol is keeping going? Is it fun? Is it connection? Is it energy? Is it avoidance? Is it that I'm looking for this day to give me something and I haven't found it yet? Ask, what am I trying not to transition into? Am I trying not to be bored, to be alone with my thoughts, to admit that I'm tired, or to not let the day end because it doesn't feel satisfying enough? Use that 4S new belief system. See, soothe, separate, shift. And then take one action that supports that real need. If the need is rest, then move towards rest. If the need is interest, then do something that engages you for 10 minutes. If the need is connection, then text someone, call someone, make a plan for real connection. And if the need is the permission to stop, then give yourself permission to stop. This is the work. Not perfection, not force, not shame, just awareness and practice. And as we close this series, remember that alcohol core beliefs are not evidence that something is wrong with you. They are evidence that your brain has learned. It has learned that alcohol promises relief, fun, connection, reward, and momentum. And if you have practiced those beliefs for years, then of course they feel very true. But beliefs that are learned can be challenged. They can be questioned, softened, and replaced with new evidence. Alcohol may seem to promise relief from stress, but you can learn real relief. Alcohol may promise more fun and connection, but you can learn to create those with more presence. Alcohol may be your reward, but you can learn to reward yourself in ways that actually restore you. And alcohol may promise to keep you going, but you can learn that sometimes the most powerful thing you do is to stop. All right, my friends, that's all I have for you this week. I hope you have enjoyed this series of what makes drinking less hard, and I hope you'll come check out Mostly Dry July. Until next time, choose peace, and I will see you on Thursday. Thanks for listening to the Alcohol Minimalist podcast. Take something you learned from this week's episode and put it into action. Changing your drinking habits and creating a peaceful relationship with alcohol is 100% possible. You can stop worrying, stop feeling guilty about overdrinking, and become someone who desires alcohol less. I work with people in 2 different ways, and you can learn about them over at my website. Go to www.mollywatts.com/workwithme or reach out to me directly. Shoot me an email, molly@mollywatts.com. We'll jump on a call and decide what might work best for you. This podcast is really just the beginning of our conversation. Let's keep it going. If there's one thing I know, it's that change is way easier when you stop trying to do it alone.